Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today's episode is a crossover episode, republished from the Ohio Fund Report, a companion podcast where I explore some of the most ambitious companies and builders shaping Ohio's future. Stories that feel right at home here on Lay of the Land. So with that, please enjoy. Lay of the Land is brought to you and is proudly sponsored by Roundstone Insurance. Headquartered in Rocky River, Ohio, Roundstone shares Lay of the Land's same passion for bold ideas and lasting impact from our community's entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders. Since 2005, Roundstone has pioneered a self-funded captive health insurance model that delivers robust savings for small and medium-sized businesses. They are part of the solution to rising healthcare costs, helping employers offer affordable, high-quality care while driving job creation and economic growth throughout Northeast Ohio. Like many of the voices featured on Lay of the Land, including Roundstone's founder and CEO Mike Schroeder, Roundstone believes entrepreneurship, innovation, and community to be the cornerstones of progress. To learn more about how Roundstone is transforming employee health benefits by empowering employers to save thousands in per-employee per-year healthcare costs, please visit RoundstoneInsurance.com. Roundstone Insurance, built for entrepreneurs, backed by innovation, committed to Cleveland.
This entire process and then this factory was born out of frustration in construction. So by the time a unit leaves this room, and we're doing 4 units a day in this room, it is drywalled, taped, and mudded. Complete frame is built with plumbing in the floor and electrical in the wall, completely insulated, fire suppression already installed, finished flooring already installed, and ready to move out. So if you think about the amount of time it would take to do that on job site, we are already 5 months ahead by the time it leaves this room. It's a complete game changer from that dynamic.
Hello, everyone. I am Jeffrey Stern, your host of today's Ohio Fund Report with Brad DeHays, founder and CEO of Connect Real Estate and Connect Housing Blocks. This conversation with Brad explores the journey of a developer turned innovator who began buying small distressed properties while still in college and has since built one of the most ambitious real estate and housing manufacturing platforms in the whole country. Through Connect Real Estate, Brad has become known for tackling projects that others have overlooked, transforming abandoned power plants, trolley barns, and neglected downtown buildings into vibrant new places that preserve their history while meeting today's needs. That same entrepreneurial vision inspired Brad to launch Connect Housing Blocks, headquartered in a 630,000 square foot modular housing facility that is now one of the largest modular apartment factories in the world, proudly based here in Ohio. Using state-of-the-art equipment and prefabrication methods, Connect Housing Blocks produces high-quality apartments from start to finish, eliminating nearly all measuring, cutting, and heavy lifting from the process. The result is faster, more efficient, and more consistent housing production at scale and at lower cost. Brad's story is ultimately about seeing possibility where others see prohibitive obstacles and reimagining an industry stuck in old processes. And fittingly, our conversation today takes place right in the heart of Connect Housing Blocks facility, offering a clear picture at the true scale and ambition of what Brad and his team have built. In our discussion, Brad shares how he has navigated the multiple chapters of starting and scaling Connect, the founding insight that led him to pursue industrial-scale modular housing in the first place, how he engages communities and leverages public-private partnerships, his unique approach to talent and culture, the dire state of housing in America today, and his vision for solving it by massively scaling up our housing production capability. So please enjoy this awesome conversation with Brad DeHays.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ohio Fund Report, a show dedicated to raising the collective ambition of Ohio. Before we dive in, just a quick note. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Nothing you hear today should be taken as investment advice, a recommendation, or an offer to buy or sell any securities. Please note that the Ohio Fund and its affiliates may maintain investments in the companies discussed. Any forward-looking statements you hear today are based on current expectations and may change. Please do your own research and consult with your advisors before making any investment decisions. For more information on the Ohio Fund, please visit theohiofund.com.
So we are amidst a housing crisis. Affordability, availability, supply of housing is breaking across the country. And the conversation over the last decade or so, policy or otherwise, circles around interest rates, tax incentives, and breaks, unit counting, but to me seems to kind of miss the forest through the trees of the underlying fundamental need to drive unit costs down and massively increase our production capabilities. So before we talk about Connect housing blocks and the work you're doing to actually build out that production capability to move the needle on the problem, I kind of want to ground the whole conversation today in the problem itself and how you think about what the problem is, the scale, the scope of it, and just paint a picture for how and why you feel this opportunity even exists in the first place.
I think when you look at the problem of rising prices and unsustainable demand that is not being met with supply, you have to look at all the factors that go into it. And I think all of these factors, when we talk about it, people that are in different fields will typically, they'll navigate to the field that kind of ties to their field because of their level of expertise. And, so if you talk to bankers and you talk to nonprofits, they may talk about financing. If you talk about, you talk to law firms, you may talk about eviction rates, you may talk about policy. If you're talking to accounting firms, you may talk about, tax reform with regards to real estate. You talk to real estate agents, it's about supply and loans, availability of capital. If you talk to builders, they're going to say it's labor. They may point a little bit to some of the supply issues with regards to tariffs, because that's a hot button item. But, I look at really the supply and demand curve over 15 years, what has really affected it. And I was a developer in the 08-09 crisis. I was a developer in COVID. And one thing that I remember is coming out of the 08-09 crisis from 2012 to 2019, when interest rates were floating around zero, and we were able to get commercial mortgage rates in the 3s and low 4s, we still didn't build enough. And so I started thinking about what was our reasons for not building enough when that happened. And it always comes down to construction. I've had a construction company for 25 years. We've been scaling it nonstop. And really what we've seen is it's just a move in the labor portion of construction that has been unsustainable. We have, less and less people in the trades and more demand for the product. So I think that's that's the most difficult thing to talk about. We can talk about education of the trades, but the reality is I am like the youngest of Generation X. So, I was born in 1979. I think 1980 might be the cutoff. And I was the last tranche of shop class. And we had shop class and vocational schools, and there really wasn't a stigma about it, just putting a tool in someone's hand at that time. And a lot of people our age had, relatives, parents, grandparents that were in the trades or in manufacturing. And it wasn't as strange to them to be doing work on the weekends or work in the evenings or help participate in some kind of hands-on trade. At some point, right after my generation, it really got heavy in tech and internet, which I think obviously
I never went to shop class.
That's exactly right. And you're definitely not a Generation X, right? So I think that movement in itself started to shift. And it started to shift, and it started a stigma. that now, a lot of people are trying to bring themselves back to is how do we train people in the skilled trades? And the reality of it is that, there's such a gap between the 45-year-old worker and the 20-year-old worker, and it's unsustainable. It's difficult to fill, and I think, there's been some noble efforts in education and certifications of skilled trades, but there's just too much demand, too much capital out there compared to the amount of people willing to do the work. So this imbalance is really something without, catastrophic change. We're just not going to be able to, definitely not going to be able to turn it around, but we're not even going to be able to stabilize it. And I think that's a fact that everybody now is directly coming in contact with.
Yeah. So take us back to your realization over time, or maybe it was acute, of construction as the bottleneck, and when you felt within you this desire to make the leap from developer to ask yourself, hey, maybe we need to actually reinvent the entire production process itself to address this problem.
I think it wasn't an epiphany by any means. I think it was basically this entire process, and then this factory was born out of frustration in construction. So we've had a construction company for 25 years that we started, and my partner in that construction company is A.J. Hawk, the football player, and then I have another partner, Bradley Annan, that runs our general contracting side, and he's fantastic. We started seeing that it was more and more difficult to fill vacant roles. And it was more difficult to scale. And then we started seeing our friends that had subcontracting companies begin to be bought out by venture capital. And we started looking at this and we were thinking, okay, venture capital does not enter an industry with the expectation of making less money next year. So what we started to see is that, with venture capital moves into the industry, there was a vertical push in wages, there was a vertical push in prices, and when that would normalize, we knew that we were in trouble. We were in trouble on the general contractor side, dealing with subcontractors, and then on the developer side, with regard to cost of projects. So this happened, I think, started to happen in 2015, 2016, and then really it just got 17, 18, 19. It really got volume, got going. So by the time, I think it was 2017, we had a group that came to town, a fund that was out of Washington, D.C., that was started by some very prominent people in the tech industry called Revolution. And they had a fund of funds that one of them was called Rise the Rest. And they had a...
This is Steve Case's...
That's Steve Case's fund, And so they had called the Columbus Partnership here in Columbus and wanted to meet with a developer just to get a lay of the land for Central Ohio. And I received that call, and they asked if I would spend time with the Rise of the Rest Fund. So I did, and they had a director named Tom Danilek, and Tom is fantastic. He was the managing director of Heinz, which is a huge office management company across the United States. So knew his stuff, was from Chicago, and we hit it off. And we spent several days together. And he probably made 3 trips where we literally would spend all day together. And I think it was maybe the 3rd trip where he said it, and I helped keep them out of some bad deals. I don't want to say that I got them into any great deals, but, the market then was really hot. So, and we look at, saving money and staying out of bad deals is sometimes better than getting in great deals. And so at the end, he said, hey, Brad, I feel like we owe you something. And I didn't have any projects for them because we were doing heavily incentivized tax credit deals at the time. And we just kind of were in our path. But he said, we had invested, have you ever thought about Modular? And I said, I've heard about it, but I don't know much about it. And I was thinking manufactured homes, and I was thinking double wides, and kind of the whole Clayton Homes type concept. And I said, it's not really the space I really want to be in. He goes, no, Brad, there's a movement here I think you need to be a part of. And we invested in a company on the West Coast that is called Blockable, that is out of Seattle, and they have their prototype facility in Portland. And he goes, would you like to go check it out? And I said, you mean I can go out there and tour their prototype facility? And he said, yeah. I said, why would they let me do that? And he said, well, we're one of their largest investors, and we think that we can make it happen. I said, absolutely. So I went out there, I met with them, and I spent the day with, their CEO and their COO.
Yeah.
And I'm a builder that we had our own trades group. So we literally employed finished carpenters, rough carpenters, masons. So we understand what we call methods and means of construction.
Yep.
So when I went out there, I quickly could see, okay, I see why their product makes sense, but I would do it differently. And a lot of times that's what it is. You see someone's product, and you just say, okay, I like that they did this and this, but I think this would work different. And what I did is I came back and I started thinking about, all right, how can we create a product that uses the same materials that we use in standard construction, but establish a process around it to where the process streamlines everything. And we started looking at manufacturing.
Yeah.
And we started looking at other companies, and those companies, a lot of them would try to leg into the business and maybe do 100,000 square feet. And if you do something like that, that's great, but then you've got to rely on the skill set of the worker, and essentially you're doing construction indoors at that point.
Yeah.
So we knew that we had to do something that was large enough, that would be very high barrier to entry, but we would be able to do manufacturing. So we started bringing in automotive engineers, and we started putting together a line. But it was for a process that us as a contractor and us as a developer knew from product all the way backwards through process that we would be able to utilize and capitalize on. And
yeah,
that was the timeline. And from there, it just kind of, started taking off.
Yeah. So I remember last we spoke, I know you're an enthusiast, a student of entrepreneurship generally, founders, other companies. What did you learn about why Modular hadn't gotten to a level of scale that I think maybe some of those venture capitalists were thinking it should be at this point, and where you felt, you could do it differently? The understanding of the means and the methodology and all that, but why hasn't it gotten to where it needs to be yet?
Yeah, so I think whenever we do something, we try to get into things that are very high barrier to entry, and more so than study the successes, we try to study the failures and some of the reasons why businesses fail. So one of the things we looked at was, there was Katerra at that time.
Yep.
They had massive capital backing, and they had a panelized concept, which are called cassettes, which you're doing a wall. Well, I mean, as a builder, in commercial builder, some of the largest time delays are code related. It's code related and it's skilled trade related.
Yeah.
Well, the issue with that is if you're doing cassettes, it does help your transportation. You can flat panel walls and send them out, and you're not shipping any air. But the issue is every connection, if you've done 100 projects commercial, you understand that every connection that's done in the field has to be inspected by a trades inspector for that municipality.
Yeah.
It also then has to be completed by a licensed subcontractor. So we knew that in itself creates confusion. It works for hospitals where you have these very expensive manifolds for gas piping and different kind of piping that happen behind a hospital bed.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. Some offices it works for, but when you talk about residential, you typically, in residential plans examination and in residential code enforcement, you don't have the most skilled plans examiner and the most skilled inspectors on every project. You may have a few, you may get lucky, but the most part, those highly skilled examiners and highly skilled code officials are doing, universities and hospitals and large office and event space, the ones to where large groups of people are going to be. So we quickly said, all right, cassette is not the way to go for residential. And then the other thing is, how fast can we get big? We didn't want to get too big too fast, because the issue would be your interest will eat you. So we tried to do this without debt.
Yeah.
One way to do that is you go out and you bring in a ton of equity and you make promises that you may not be able to fulfill. We don't operate that way. So what we did is we put together a plan, and we wanted to figure out how can we move in the same direction as the local community.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of growth around Central Ohio in industrial, and a lot of it is due to shipping. And that growth was in the outskirts, outside the 270 outer belt. So we looked at that and we were like, all right, it makes the most sense to move out there and to try to do jobs. But then we started looking at it and we're like, we're just going to cannibalize the workers that are out there. And we're going to create logistical issues for transportation for workers that need jobs in the inner city to get out there. So then we started looking at, okay, how can we bring the jobs to the communities that need it the most?
Yep.
And that's when we started putting together, we're like, all right, we need to find locations. And I actually had someone that was in our office that was a professional athlete, a hockey player, that was looking online and found a building, that's at the time was 670,000 square feet on 27 acres. And we're sitting in it right now. And when they found it, I was like, that's it. And we came in and we started negotiating it, and we ended up acquiring the property. And we started to put together a plan for, okay, the next thing was, if we build this, how are we going to fill it with employees?
Yeah.
So we then went and we started looking at, new market tax credits for the right type of machinery. We started looking at, any kind of employment incentives that are out there. And we put together a typical developer's package to do a job infrastructure piece. And the state of Ohio had a product that was coming out right at that time called the Transformational Mixed-Use Development, or TMUD for short. And we were the first winners of a magnet prize in that round. And that kicked everything off. City of Columbus was very helpful to us. The local port authority was helpful to us. And by doing that, right at the right time, we were able to build something of a massive scale with very little debt. So we were able then to take the time to grow the workforce. And then we just had to create the process so the local workers that were here, we were able to figure out how to get them upskilled quickly. And that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. So not to lose sight of where we literally are. It's pretty amazing to me, having kind of walked through the whole hundreds of thousands of square feet of facility here. Right over there, we have raw materials coming in, and on the other side are finished units. And I think when people hear, you have the capacity to build thousands of units a year, it's a little hard to conceptualize. But if you break it down and you think about the reality of what that means, which is a few houses, a few units a day, just take us through, what is the process of what's happening, from here all the way to hundreds of thousands of square feet over there? And how different is that from the traditional way of construction?
So in traditional construction, we use a Gantt chart to do our construction schedule. That's for construction. And
all the dependencies.
And basically you extrapolate the timeline of the build, and you have your different trades that are stacked vertically, and they overlap, right? And you start to look at, they call that trade stacking. And you look at these times in trade stacking when the most people are on the project. And, that timeline is lineal, right? So what it is when we first started a construction project in traditional construction, you do site development. You have all your site development. Well, then the only people that can be on it are the people pushing the dirt.
Yeah.
Then once they have gone through and they've excavated and they've graded all the ground, you then can bring in your rough plumbing, your mains, all your sewage. You can bring in your storm sewers. You bring in your footers for your foundation. And you start through and do those pours. Again, only those trades are on the job site. You're not trade stacking yet. Then you come in and you build your foundation, and then your structural exoskeleton.
Yeah.
The exoskeleton could be wood, it could be steel, it could be concrete, depends on the type and the height of the building. But the reality of that is even that's very little trade stacking going on at that point, because it's big, heavy things that are dangerous to be around. So after the exoskeleton is up, you then do your exterior, you do your roof, then you dry it in, you do your windows, and then you can start doing a little bit more trade stacking, your roughs come in.
Yeah.
Well, just at that point is when you really can pack a job site. So you go from having 5 to 10 people on a mega site for an apartment complex to having 150 over a period of so the first 4 or 5 months, you may only have, 5 to 30.
Right.
And then you go, boom, trade stack, 150, 200 people everywhere, cars, trucks everywhere. Well, when that happens, a lot of inefficiencies happen. And, theft happens. And material destruction happens and waste. What we do in the factory is we take that timeline for development and we break it and we put them on top of each other. So if you think about it, at the same time as we break ground on a job site, we're already building the trade stacking. We're building the frames. We're rolling the steel. We're doing the wiring. We're doing the drywall. So by the time a unit leaves this room, and we're doing 4 units a day in this room, by the time it leaves this room, it is drywalled, taped, and mudded. Complete frame is built with plumbing in the floor and electrical in the wall, completely insulated, fire suppression already installed, finished flooring already installed, and ready to move out and already quality control checked for all of those trades. So if you think about the amount of time it would take to do that on job site, we are already 5 months ahead by the time it leaves this room.
Wow.
We're doing this at the same time that at the job site, the dozers are moving dirt. So the project that's on the line right now, they already are grading ground. They don't even have footers in the ground. By the time this finishes here, it starts getting stacked in October.
Yeah.
The entire complex will be stacked in about 8 to 12 weeks. It's a complete game changer from that dynamic.
Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of reminds me, so in my entrepreneurial world, which is software development, there's this often cited trade-off between speed, quality, and scope, where if you want to improve one of them, it often is at the expense of the other two. And what is amazing about what you're doing is I feel like you just made the triangle bigger.
Yeah.
You talked, we were talking before about even just take the countertops and how, because what you're doing at scale, you can offer, the high quality granite level materials relative to laminate that, it's all 3 of those things. It's a bigger triangle.
I've not thought of it that way, but I think you're onto something. So in typical construction, we talk about scope.
Yeah.
We never talk about task. But if you're a person that has employed the actual worker and not just been a general contractor that employed subs, we learned this from our self-perform group, methods and means of construction. You have to do daily tasks lists for every employee. And it is an incredible undertaking every morning. So, but what happens at big job sites is you give the subcontractor, they have their job box meeting.
Yeah.
They deal in scopes. But that subcontractor goes to their employees and they divvy out the tasks. Well, the thing that we do here is we have taken in the entire process a scope, and we do not issue scopes. We issue tasks to individual workers. That way they can perfect their tasks over and over and be successful, and the learning curve is significantly shorter.
Right.
So what that means here in the factory is people, they don't have to see the big picture.
Right.
They're going to witness it when it's done and everything, but they can actually master their task over and over again. That's why we have cut stations. We don't have field fabrication. There are a lot of things that we don't allow here that are commonplace on the job site, and it's a complete game changer.
Right.
On the other side with material consumption, when I'm a developer and I have to buy material at a job site, so as a developer, I've got my general partner investors, my limited partner investors all over at top of me that we're trying to make sure we meet numbers.
Yeah.
Everything below me as a developer is contract-based, right? So I have an AIA contract with the general contractor. In our projects, we own the general contracting company. So there's all those fee-based margin line items there. But under the general contractor, you have subcontractors, and there's line items there. There's margin there at every level. The subcontractors have margin on their labor. They have slippage on their labor. They have overhead and profit on their labor. All of those are percentages. And then you get to materials.
Yeah.
Then the material is either purchased through a retailer or a distributor who each of those levels are putting margin onto it. And the subcontractor puts margin on materials. And then below the distributor, the manufacturer who's selling it to the distributor is charging shipping, freight, all of this, that then gets doubled up from the distributor to the sub. Well, when you think about percentages, it's a great thing if you're compounding percentages, if you're the person getting paid, like in investing.
Yep.
You know, compounding is a great thing. But when you're the one paying, it's terrible. So what we found here is that we're able to purchase directly from manufacturers, have large quantities of goods sent to the factory, and do institutional size purchases. And by doing that, we can get it, we can warehouse it, we can ship it through our lines. So like for countertops, we did 4,900 slabs of countertops that we then, put into our process. So we don't need to buy countertops now for 3.5 years. We actually can install solid surface countertops into affordable housing projects cheaper than we can do laminate.
Yeah.
We would never, as being a spot buyer, as a developer, typically in traditional construction, we would never even have the purview into those economics. But here, we're able to push those economics to the line, and then, all of those benefits are received by the contractor at sale.
Yeah. I mean, it's really like you mentioned commonplace, like business concepts in other industries, vertical integration and factory line standardization just applied to housing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and there's so many components of the process that really make that to where I can see where other people have struggled.
Yeah.
And there's nothing is easy. Right. Nothing is easy. But we knew we had to start. We had to start with something that was large enough. So when that urge came on to where we wanted to just be like, you know what? We just want to rely on let's just get our finished carpenters in here.
Yeah.
And knock these units out. And then, because that's easy. And that's the discussion as we brought in mid-level managers. Well, why don't we just hire this trade set out? Why don't we do that? And I kept bringing everything back to say, because I've been doing that for 25 years,
right.
And I know what the end result is. The end result is they can't scale as fast as we need to scale. And if we find a group that can, they're going to charge us for it. So what we had to do is go back constantly to the process and say, okay, how can we take that scope, break it up into tasks, and how can we individualize that task to make to where a new employee can learn that in 2 hours? So we came up with the video-based learning that now we rely on, and we have, hundreds. We have a full-time videographer here that her entire job is to document process.
Yeah.
And it is for our product. But that allows us to scale, and that allows us to train significantly faster, whereas in traditional construction, we have to relearn yesterday's mistakes tomorrow. And it just happens. We always say, we'll never do that again. And then the next year in a project, we're like, we did it again.
There it goes.
And it's just, that's construction, and it's not changing.
So zooming out a bit, Connect Housing Blocks to me is one of the most ambitious companies in Ohio. How do you think about longer term, like what is your ambition and like what do you want Connect Housing Blocks to be?
So we built Connect Housing Blocks to make a difference.
Yeah.
I had someone ask us yesterday, about, why do you do affordable housing? Why do you do historic adaptive reuse renovation? Why do you try to do some of these projects that are more difficult? And it's push versus pull type entrepreneurialism.
Yeah.
I've developers by trade are typically the antagonists when they get into community meetings and things like that, because as much as people say they want development, when it's right next door to them, you'll quickly see that they'll change. And that's where the term NIMBYism, not in my backyard, came from. We have always been pulled into development. So we have tried to produce a product that the municipality wants, the community wants. And for the most part, we've been rewarded for that. And with this business, is we first said, okay, if we're going to do this, we need to do this at a scale to where once we figure it out, the barrier to entry is so high that we don't have to worry about the next group coming in and trying to copy what we built. The market is massive. And we can do this at such a high level with a high level of precision and understanding that when other people see it, they're going to say, wow, I can see why that would work, but I can also see why we can't do it.
Yeah.
And I think we're at that point. So what we've done here and looking to scale this further is we created an original manufacturing facility with economics that we cannot duplicate. We hit at just the right time when there was ARPA funds that were out there and a lot of COVID relief, other COVID relief dollars and new programs that were out there that are simply not available right now.
Yeah.
And we built a factory that was large enough in a community that needed it with people who needed jobs to where we have something that put us at a position to where we had time. We had staying power. We didn't have, to recruit this massive amount of equity with these expectations of short-term returns. We had great partners, great investors like the Ohio Fund that they understand that, it's a growth story. And now we're at a point now where our production has got to a point of where we're making money.
Yeah.
And that was a massive hurdle. The path to get there was really difficult. But the best thing is we've just scratched the surface on the production of this facility alone.
Yeah.
This is one shift. It's a factory. I mean, we can, there's a lot more we can do, but what we also did is we sourced all of our equipment globally. And a lot of this equipment was two-year lead time.
Yeah.
Custom, it takes 2 years to have it made, takes, another 6 to 8 months to commission it. And then you have to create all of your software to support it for your own product. Massive undertaking. Now that we've done that, even when this factory for assembly is fully going, and we're doing 10 to 12 modules a day out of here, our equipment is only operating at 40% capacity at that point. I mean, if we were operating at 70% capacity, we wouldn't even be able to talk right now. It'd be so loud.
Yeah.
But the great thing about it is, we can prop up at least 3 assembly facilities in other states with the equipment that we have here, and we can bundle that prefabricated material and ship it out via rail, and then we can assemble it in other states. And that's a game changer. That allows us to scale at an incredible rate. And then once we're an assembly facility in another state, we can then make the decision based on that market if it can support another manufacturing facility.
Yeah.
So that's our growth plans, and we're moving forward in that direction.
Yeah. So what do you feel the future of, so there's a few terms, modular, prefabrication, construction generally. Where do you see this all going? And what is Connect's role within the ecosystem kind of writ large?
So last year, I think modular construction in its entirety, and this is manufactured homes, trailers, apartments, palletized walls for hospitals and schools, modular, bathrooms. Modular was only 7% of the United States construction industry. Wow. And I want to say that maybe it was 8 years ago, it was 4%. Wow. So we're talking about, a growth market that it's incredible.
Yeah.
We don't have to be the biggest player out there. We don't have to be the best player out there. We don't, there's not these, we can be a pioneer and operate like a settler, and the statement used to be, the pioneers get slaughtered and the settlers get fat.
Yeah.
In an industry that can grow this fast, we understand the product and we understand the use of it, and we have a demand for the product. So we're able to really grow and operate quickly, be a big player in the space to help create best practices in the relationship of lenders and developers, insurance companies and manufacturers, transportation and logistics. We're already in these communications at a large scale across the entire gamut. And I'm now going to be joining the Manufactured Housing Commission at a federal level and hopefully bringing, systematic change into the industry. Connect Housing Blocks, I think, is going to be a leader in that space. Doesn't have to be the leader.
Yeah.
There's room for a lot of us, and I think that there's a lot of great companies already in the space, already operating at a high level.
Yeah. So help make us tangible for a moment. What have been your kind of favorite examples of all the units on the other side of this? I mean, ultimately they get assembled and they become livable, structures in the real world. What does it look like, outside of the factory?
I think that whole that matrix moment when people see what it is, I think is a key thing. When we did the station apartments at Trolley District, and we put that out there, and people were like, "That's what it is."
Yeah.
And the next thing they say, "You didn't build that in a factory," And I point to all the reasons why it performs better than traditional construction. You can really see the people that have been to the factory, that have gone to see the finished product, their wheels really start turning.
Yeah.
And, we hoped that would happen, and we kind of, knew that it was going to happen. But until it happens, you still kind of are a little bit nervous. It's almost like the artwork side of it.
Yeah.
And when we did the station apartments, we knew that we wanted to do something dynamic enough that when people looked at it, they were going to say, "That's really attractive." And we could have done proof of concept with the smaller, less dynamic build, but we knew what we had. We're one of the only players in this space that can do large-scale, stacked, multi-story apartment complexes. We have a fire-rated structure. We can go up to 11 stories tall. We can be the top 11 stories of a 17-story building. We can go on top of a parking garage. There's a dynamics to this that we've just scratched the surface. And there are a lot of players in the single-family home space. We can do that too. I'm not saying that that's easy. What I'm saying is we did the most difficult type of build first.
Yeah.
And we created a manufacturing line for it. So we're going to create high volume in this space, get as much product out there to help the communities. I mean, from a disaster relief standpoint, we can literally put disaster relief units out there that are a higher quality than what families are typically living in those situations. And then we can take them back and put them into an apartment complex. So temporary housing does not need to be discarded. Temporary housing can become permanent housing in a use that it was meant for. And I think that that's when you're talking about labor shortages, it is not wasting any labor in the building space because we can't afford it. Like the instability of the supply-demand curve right now, we keep putting more and more money out, which we need. We keep trying to, regulate and make zoning more attainable, which we need. We try to reduce financing costs, which we need. We try to provide, rent vouchers, which we need. But all that does is create more demand, which I am for.
Yeah.
The problem is the issue that we've always had back to when we had low interest rates. The bottleneck was, can we build it? Can we build that fast? And we can't. And zoning is a part of it, but the reality is we don't have the labor pool. So the space that we think that us as a company, we want to be a volume shooter.
Yeah.
We want to be a volume shooter and mass-produced, high-quality housing for stacked apartment complexes. But that doesn't have to be the initial use. The emergency housing component, FEMA, emergency relief, HUD, some of their components. We want to be a company that can help facilitate rapid deployment of housing for people in need, but then can also convert it into permanent housing. I think that's a space where we're going to find some traction.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. I definitely want to revisit the labor topic, but I want to pull on the artistic thread actually for a moment, because it almost seems a little trivial and narrow, but I would imagine, I don't know this for sure, but I would imagine some of the pushback you might get on modular generally is design, aesthetic. It's not going to look good, but there's an intentionality around aesthetic and quality, and I think it would probably surprise a lot of people. But I'm just curious, your philosophy on design and aesthetic and finish.
So we are Connect Real Estate is our development company. We're one of the largest adaptive reuse historic developers in this region, definitely in the state. But we are massive proponents of architectural integrity. And, there's differing opinions when you're a historian or a historical developer. A lot of true historians that I know look for juxtaposition.
Yeah.
If I own a truly historic building and it is of the times when it was developed, and that could be any times. We always look back at like turn of the century real estate as, all the big spires and the columns and or brick, cornices or stone cornices. But the reality is if I'm doing a new build apartment complex across the street from my historic building, I want that new build apartment complex to look new.
Yep.
I want it to juxtapose against my historic building because it'll draw more attention to my historic building. If I go to try to copy the brick tone or the brick features, it's a little bit of a pretender. And, it's too expensive to ever try to get to that level of integrity, that we had back, when we had significant amount of skilled masons that worked, especially in here in Ohio. So what we found is how can we create aesthetics and architectural integrity in our modular to where it guarantees that it's not this flush-faced building with flush hallways. And the integrity doesn't just have to be on the outside. How can we program the integrity for the interior? So we did first on the outside is we created different depths and how those communicate between the units. It takes multiple, we have small modulars that are one apartment per module.
Yep.
We also have large-scale floor plans that are multiple modulars to make apartments. Well, on the outside, those are different depths. They align on the inside in the hallway, so we have a straight hallway. But on the outside, you create opportunities for decks and different protrusions that then allow you to take some of these typical architectural features and put them onto an apartment complex where you essentially could do anything. You can do brick, hardy backer, you can do lap siding, you could do vinyl, you could do board and batten.
Yeah.
So all these like different things we do on our buildings. On the inside, we programmed all of our mechanicals to go to the hallway. And we studied and we took photography of five-star hotel hallways. And we said, how can we make this look to where it's not this nondescript, bland hallway where you look down and it's like doors and wall. And we did soffits. And we did chases vertically that bring the mechanicals up and down in areas to where you create this in and out feature that it makes it look like a hotel. But it's by design and it's by necessity. So we're very proud of how that laid out. It took a lot of time, but I think it's working out well.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. So how do you guys think about the labor component of all of this?
So I think in general, we have had no shortage of applicants.
Yep.
So we have 160 full-time employees here now. We are building out our second shift, which is, we run 410s Monday through Thursday, and then we have overlap on Thursday. And our second shift is during the week as we're building out. That's Thursday through Sunday. We then can do a second shift during the day. We can do a third shift at night. This thing is running 7 days a week. We are hiring 6 to 8 people a week.
Wow.
It's incredible. But the one thing, though, is when we're a second chance employer and we're hiring people that some have never had a job before, and almost all of them have not been in the construction industry, you're going to have issues with regards to accountability of schedule, showing up. So we focused our orientation process throughout time here to, for the first 90 days, it's very strict. And because we're running a manufacturing facility, people have to be here. People have to learn how to be safe. So there's a huge amount of attrition in that first 90 days. But once people are at 90 days, they go from a yellow hard hat to a white hard hat, and they get a raise. And the stickiness after that is fantastic.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue to onboard people, continue to train them. We don't use the word teach here. Because really, we train. We put tool in hand within 2 hours once people get here. And we're very satisfied with that. In the general construction industry, I can talk about that because we still own a construction company.
Yeah.
the change that we've seen in the last 10 years in labor, not just the skilled trades, but general labor, has been massive. So 10 years ago, we could see this shift in skilled trades to where there were less and less workers available.
Yeah.
And your master electricians, master plumbers, master carpenters, HVAC techs, they were aging, 45 to 55 years old.
Yep.
There's a lot of documented, statistics on this that this isn't a feeling, this is actual facts, that labor pool was not backfilling. So what we found was, when I first started my construction company 25 years ago, cigarettes were our biggest problem. And, you would have smoke breaks. You would have guys that would be bringing their cigarettes into the job site. They'd have a tool in one hand, a cigarette in the other, and you'd have to shut that down.
Yeah.
Now, honestly, we look at it and we're like, that other than the health issues, that wasn't that bad. Because now the iPhone, we cannot get the phone out of the job site. And if you went to one of my job sites right now, and I've talked to other large-scale general contractors, they have even employed scramblers for job sites to try to scramble cell phone signals.
Wow.
It's that bad. The reason why is people are addicted, and the subcontractors are having difficult time filling the roles under them.
Yeah.
So I can't, as a general contractor, one of my employees, which would be a superintendent or a project manager, they can't go out and tell a sub's employees, put the phones away or get off the job site. Because that employee will just quit, get a job down the street. Yeah. So I literally can walk out, drive up to a job site. 5 to 7 years ago, you could see people sliding their phones in their pocket.
Yeah.
Now they don't care. They just keep it out. I literally step over people in hallways and go into units, and people are watching videos. They're not my employee.
Wow.
But I know that I'm paying for them.
Yeah.
I'm paying for them at the GC level. I'm paying for them at the developer and the limited partner level. And it's painful to watch. What we used to be able to do is, your skilled trades for 10 years ago, you would typically have the Latino workforce that would be your drywallers and your painters and your masons and your landscapers and your roofers. Now, though, those communities would show up and they would cook their own lunch on the job site. They would have their communities. They would work really hard. You wouldn't see cell phones. They would kind of keep amongst themselves. And now they've been completely Americanized, which isn't a bad thing. But for work, it's the same habits that we have in other trades. So now you show up and they're on their phone. They're not paying attention. They're not getting work done. And it really is just kind of reciprocated through the entire workforce. The best tool we have in this factory is a locker. It's a locker.
No phones.
No phones.
Phones in the locker.
We have machinery and equipment around anywhere through here that if you're not paying attention, it will hurt you. And so when people start, cell phones are in the locker. And we've had to terminate a lot of employees for that. But now culture is set, and that's the expectation. And what it does is people have their eyes up.
Yep.
They talk, they communicate. Now rapport amongst workers is better here than it is at our job sites. And I really like it. I like where it's going.
Yeah. How do you think about the culture of Connect, and what is that to you?
Culture starts at the top. And one of the things where every time you start something new or impose change, that destabilizes.
Yeah.
So one of the big things that we've always held true is I played sports, and establishing discipline and outwardly speaking about it is a really important thing. We actually don't use the word team out here, and we don't use the word teach. And the reason why is when we start a new company, a team is only as effective as the individual handling his tasks. So the word team has to be earned over time. So what we did here is we implemented task-level jobs, and we reward people for doing that. We don't allow people to group. We have something called walking in tandem, which are two people walking through the facility. We don't allow that. We don't allow it. It's part of orientation. We have gray hats that are employees that have been promoted here into supervisor roles. that their sole job is being a people multiplier. Being a people multiplier is just breaking up groups of people. So if you ever drive by like a union job out in the field, which, it's necessary, but they have a lot of people grouped up doing a task. Well, here in the factory, everyone has a task. If they don't, they should be in training. And so we quickly break up clusters of people, our gray hats do, and they break up people walking in tandem. 2 people don't have to go throw something away. But that lowest level of accountability creates a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
That sense of purpose then allows people to thrive in their role and see success. More so, it keeps them from getting pulled away. So, that has it took a while to establish that culture. But once the culture is established and people are financially and through respect rewarded for it, it takes on itself. So now we're at a spot here to where we have momentum.
Yep.
We've had it for quite some time. And as we bring new people in, it self-governs. We still have to check up on it. It's kind of, we always say I coach kids sports. It's like, get back in line, get back in line, get back in line. If we stop looking at the line, chaos.
Yeah.
So everybody, our top level leaders, the black hats out here, they monitor our processes for breaks, and they monitor walking in tandem. It's not just on the lower level managers. And, everyone takes a sense of pride in it, and it's going very well. And it's easier to do here than it is at a job site.
Well, I know you mentioned none of this is easy. Perhaps it's all difficult. I'm curious, when you reflect on the journey thus far, I know it's been kind of an iterative improvement over time, the process, just everything, and I'm sure it will continue to be. But what sticks out to you as the greatest earned wisdom from Connect Housing Blocks, perhaps relative to all the work you've done prior?
I think there's two instances that really kind of tie that together.
Yeah.
So on the worker side, we recently did an orientation video that I only participated in for a few snippets of coverage. But the video group went through and they interviewed our employees.
Yep.
And the stories of the employees is something that it's amazing. Honestly, I can't even explain how proud I am of everybody just to have that kind of change. And it's all based on structure and opportunity. I preach when we first start this, we give to charity, but this is not a charity. We give opportunity here. As a business, we provide to charity, but in our business, we're not a charity. So that structure, what it's done with a lot of our workers who either haven't had jobs or had addiction issues or had, been formerly incarcerated. Yeah. They have embraced that structure, and they've taken it into their personal lives, and they told some of those stories. Wow. And honestly, it's a borderline of tearing up and being proud. And the fact that a lot of those changes occurred within these walls, but it's not something that I did directly. Yeah. It's something that other people here did to help them. It's a complete game changer, and it's happening every day. And then you take the investor side. When we first saw this, we've been doing difficult projects as a development company for over 20 years. And we're known for doing really difficult urban infill projects. And I used to always hear other developers that are friends of mine that are very successful, they would say, why do you do that? And, Brad will do it, just call Brad. And, you always wonder if you're the guy running into the fire, right? And they know that, hey, you're going to get burnt. And we have always selected to get pulled into developments, and we figured them out. And when we went to do this, there were a lot of people in the industry that said, okay, good luck. A lot of people have failed. And honestly, we were cautiously optimistic. Yep. Because we knew when other people have failed, we absolutely could fail. But what we had a group of investors. I always start with my money, and I always start investing. And when you've had some success, it gets more and more difficult to push your chips back in. Yeah. But what we did is we had the support of the government. We had state and local support, and we knew that through some of these programs that they had faith in us, and they stepped up big time. then we had investors that I put my money up first. But before I even put mine up, I had all of our core investors said, Brad, we're in. When you're ready, we're in. That's all I needed.
Yeah.
I didn't take their money at that time because I didn't want any of them to be that much at risk because we didn't know what we didn't know.
Yeah.
So I started it, and once I got traction and I was like, okay, I can see it. I can see the full path. I put together some funding pools, and they went like that. And that was when there was maybe 1 or 2 modulars on the whole floor, but we had a prototype, and we had machinery coming in, and we had a process. And when that happened, I was so proud that investors were like, hey, we're willing to put capital towards this. We're willing to back you up. And then from then, it's just been more and more.
Yeah.
As we had these victories, more people came in, and now we're seeing interest, on a broader scale. And I think like it's just, it's that waterfall effect. But there's those things at the very top level on the employee side, impact, and on the investor side, and the faith they've had in us. That's been something that's really allowed us to kind of carry that torch forward. And it's been through our entire company. Like all of our investors, all of our employees of the development side, they're excited. And we're getting top level talent coming over from other companies because they see it and recognize it.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, thank you.
So with an eye towards the future, what are you most excited about?
I think it's more of we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, you still don't know what you don't know.
I'm a little bit, there's nerves associated with this. So what we've done is we're now at a point where I can say that this has been a success.
Yeah.
How do we scale it? How do we grow? We have been focused on how can we do that without betting the farm on what we have.
Yeah.
Every time we go to grow for more, we have to trade something back in. And so so the export side of this business, we did around last year to start planning for our next assembly facility. And in the next, we have term sheets out for 2 locations right now, and we have interest from the government on maybe some different paths. So we're looking at those, and I can really see that some of our groups that have invested with us, they want to see us start running. So we're going to have to start doing things that are more rapid than maybe I would like to do.
Yeah.
Typically, if we were doing it just like, hey, make profit, reinvest the profit as retained earnings, and just go. But it's exciting because the new markets, the pull into those markets, and the fact that we understand our product better than anybody, I think it gives us just enough backbone to be able to do it. And I've never wanted to fall on our face, but I feel like there's enough people that are running with us to where, we've got enough rope. So over the next couple of years, we know we're going to have at least 2 assembly facilities that we'll be building out. Can we do 3? I think that we want to have the 3rd one located.
Yeah.
And then see how we can really step into, assisting like some of these emergencies and housing issues at a federal level. But again, we want pulled into markets. So there is a little bit of wait and see on that side of it.
Yeah. Well, we've obviously covered a lot of ground here. I'm curious, as you just kind of reflect on your whole journey, if you feel there's something particularly important that we haven't talked about that you want to bring up.
I think being an entrepreneur, as you know, you've done so many of these. You always trade in a little bit of yourself, like every time you're doing something new.
Yeah.
And we have in total our companies like 380 employees, and multiple businesses that are vertically integrated, all of them based in real estate somehow.
Yeah.
Every time that we've done this, I have 5 children, obviously, and a wife that lets me, really check back in constantly into these new risks and new projects. And I think that without that stability, it would be really difficult because you quickly lose yourself.
Yeah.
You get into a problem, you try to solve it, you lose yourself. You have to have people constantly pull you back in. My wife learned a long time ago that the best way to make sure that happens is to make me head coach on teams for our kids. And then, allowing me to, when I say I have to go do this on a weekend, you know, there's a lot of times here in this business to where it kind of makes me think of, you know, I grew up with the Dunkin' Donuts commercial of the guy waking up and saying, I've got to go make the donuts. I've got to go make the donuts. The only time to really perfect and improve on this line is when it's not running.
Yeah.
You know, so we come in and my core group of leaders, like, you know, Bradley Annan has been here since the beginning. A gentleman named Matt Shanky has been here, an engineer since the beginning. Scott Humphreys, a really close friend of mine, is our chief operating officer. We brought him in as soon as we got large enough to where we could scale. And it's been a lot of weekends of coming in here and modifying process. And that has been, you know, one of the things that I always look back to. Honestly, just being on this side of the factory.
Yeah.
We started out on this side of the factory in this room in an office below us, and the rest of the building was empty.
Wow.
And it was one machine, and then it was two, and now it's 5, and then it's all the tables, and then we've changed this line 3 times. Now it's all vertical instead of horizontal, and all these gantry cranes, and it's just, but beyond this room, it's prefab, it's raw goods fabrication, it's 120 modulars inside the finish room, and then it's all of our corporate offices on the other side of that of 20,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And then it's the 180 modulars that are finished out in the parking lot and the logistics side of the business with our big rig that's out there and all of our trailers. I think like looking at the stepping stones of this process, you know, I think trading in a lot of that private time to make it happen started at the family, went through my friends, came here into this side of the building, and then grew. And I'm so happy to see it rolling every day, regardless if I'm here or not.
I appreciate you sharing that. It's incredibly exciting. I just want to thank you for taking the time, sharing more about your journey here. It's hard not to be super excited about it, just like where it's happening. So
I appreciate it. I thank you for taking an interest. I mean, the Ohio Fund has been a great partner to us, and you know, we look at their expertise and experience, and I think, you know, getting recognition for what we've done. We did a lot of this like inside of a vacuum for a long time, mainly because we didn't know. We thought we knew what we had, but we didn't know if it was worthwhile to really go out there and call attention to it, because we've seen so many other groups call attention to themselves really early in the process. And when the floodgates are open, you've got to be ready to hit the surge to hit you. And I think we're at a point now where we're, with some of the local recognition that we've had and the federal recognition that we've had, we're able to take on that surge and we can point to things. So it's a good spot to be in, and I think the next couple years is going to be more and more, and we're just got to focus on navigating it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, appreciate it.
If people had anything they wanted to follow up with, to learn more, where on the interwebs are you pointing them to?
So I think we now have, Connect Real Estate. They've been pushing out a lot through social media, Instagram and LinkedIn, and those. So Connect Real Estate is our company on the development side. And then Connect Housing Blocks. We do have a website, Connect Housing Blocks. I think they may have some social media. We try not to put a lot out there that way, primarily just because, you know, we're still growing and you know, and then we're kind of, you know, bombarded a little bit with interest, which we appreciate, but there's so many hours in a day. But I think there's plenty of information out there to learn more, and there's information on, you know, employment opportunities, things like that, and we want to, you know, really funnel talent our way. So that's best way. That's where to find us. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ohio Fund Report. If you enjoyed this podcast, we'd love for you to leave a review on your favorite platform and subscribe to stay updated on all future episodes. You can subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or directly on our website at theohiofund.com. The information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice, an offer to sell, or a solicitation of an offer to buy any security. Past performance is not indicative of future results. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are solely their own and do not necessarily represent those of the Ohio Fund. A guest participation in this podcast does not imply an endorsement or an investment recommendation by the Ohio Fund. This podcast may include conversations with leadership of a company in which the Ohio Fund or its affiliated funds have an investment, and as such, financial interest in the success of this company, and there may be a conflict of interest in presenting information about the company and its performance. Any forward-looking statements or projections discussed during this episode are based on current expectations, assumptions, and estimates. Actual outcomes may differ materially due to a variety of risks, uncertainties, and other factors. Listeners should consult their own legal, tax, and financial advisors before making any investment decisions. For more information about the Ohio Fund, including our Form ADV, other regulatory filings, and additional conversations, please visit theohiofund.com.